The table was set for 3, not 4. The smell of frosting still hung in the air, sweet and heavy. But the laughter was coming from upstairs. Without me. A child's birthday. My grandson's. And I wasn't invited. The candlelight flickered against the untouched plate I'd set for myself, like it was mocking me. If you've ever been left out by the people you love most, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because I know how that silence feels. I remember standing there, apron still on, realizing the celebration wasn't mine to belong to anymore. That was the night I stopped waiting to be seen. It was a quiet Sunday morning when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I remember the sound so clearly, that sharp little vibration breaking the silence of the house. I reached for it without thinking, expecting another grocery list from Megan, or maybe a picture of Ethan at his soccer game. But instead, I saw a message I was never meant to see. It was from Megan, sent to David. She was asking him when I planned to move out, saying she couldn't take having help around all the time. She didn't say my name. She didn't call me Mom. Just help. I stood there for a long time, reading those words over and over. The coffee pot gurgled behind me, the smell of toast in the air. But everything felt suddenly distant, like I had slipped out of my own life and was watching it happen to someone else. I've always tried to stay useful. After my husband passed, moving in with David felt like a blessing. I helped with Ethan's lunches, kept the house clean, made dinner before they got home. It wasn't much, but it made me feel needed. And maybe that's why it hurt so much. Realizing I wasn't needed at all, just convenient. That morning, something in me went still. I didn't cry, not right away. I just stood there with that phone in my hand, knowing life wouldn't be the same after that message. That was the day I realized I wasn't part of their family anymore. Morning always begins the same way. The house is quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like it's waiting for everyone else to wake up before it remembers I'm here. I move softly through the kitchen, making coffee no one else will drink, reheating the same cup 3 times as the hours pass. The floors creak in familiar places. The refrigerator hums. These are the sounds that keep me company. By 8, I've started the laundry. The scent of detergent and warm fabric fills the air. Clean, comforting, anonymous. I fold shirts that aren't mine, wipe counters no one notices, and put away dishes that seem to multiply overnight. It's strange how invisible work becomes when no one's watching. Sometimes, when I dust the shelves in the living room, I see how much of me has quietly disappeared. The family photos on the mantel are new, all smiling faces from vacations I wasn't part of. My wedding picture used to sit there once, but it's been tucked away somewhere, maybe in one of the boxes in the basement. The garden I planted out back, the one that used to bloom with peonies every spring, was replaced last year with new turf. Easier to maintain, Megan said. My room is in the basement now. David said it would be quieter for me down there. And in a way, he was right. It's quiet enough to hear the heater kick on at night. Quiet enough to listen to my own thoughts echo. I tell myself this is temporary, that I'm helping them get through busy years, that this is what mothers do. I repeat it often, like a prayer, this is love, not obligation. But sometimes, when I pass by the closed door of their room or hear them laughing upstairs, I feel like I've drifted outside the edges of my own life. It's a strange kind of loneliness, being surrounded by the people you love and still feeling unseen. Every day blends into the next, a rhythm of small, silent duties that keep the house moving, but leave me standing still. And lately, when I catch my reflection in the window, I barely recognize the woman looking back. She moves softly, smiles when spoken to, and disappears when the lights go out. I suppose that's when it first occurred to me. Maybe I hadn't just been forgotten. Maybe I had let myself fade. Ethan's birthday fell on a Saturday that year. I remember waking up early, feeling lighter than usual, almost excited. I wanted the day to be special, for him, and maybe a little for me too. I baked his favorite cake, chocolate with strawberries, and set the table with the bright blue plates he used to love as a little boy. I even wrapped a small gift, a book about space, something we used to read together before bedtime. By late morning, I could hear laughter upstairs. Megan's voice, David's footsteps, the sound of balloons being tied and wrapping paper crinkling. It was the kind of sound that used to fill me with warmth. But that day, it made the house feel strangely divided. Joy on one floor, silence on another. When my phone buzzed, I thought maybe David was asking me to come up, to help with the candles or take a family picture. But it was a short message. Just a reminder to clean up the kitchen before they left for dinner. They'd be celebrating at a restaurant downtown. For a moment, I didn't move. The words didn't seem real. I looked around the kitchen. The cake cooling on the counter. The decorations still in the drawer. The wrapped gift sitting on the table. I had spent the whole morning preparing for a celebration I was never invited to. The sound of their laughter grew faint as they left. The front door closed. The car started. And then there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. I sat at the table, hands still dusted with flour, staring at that untouched cake. My chest felt hollow, not broken, just emptied. That was the night I understood something I'd been refusing to see. I wasn't their family anymore. I was their help. When I finally stood up, I noticed the stack of old moving boxes in the corner of the basement, the ones I hadn't touched since my husband died. For the first time in years, I looked at them and thought, maybe it was time. That night, the house was still when I began to pack, not in a rush, just slowly, carefully, like I'd done everything else in that home. I folded my clothes the way I always did, smoothing out the creases as if they still mattered. Each motion felt like both an ending and a prayer. Down in the basement, the air smelled faintly of detergent and dust. The boxes I had once avoided were now open, waiting. I filled them with small pieces of my life, photo albums, my wedding ring, a few books I couldn't part with. I left the furniture, the dishes, the curtains I'd sewn myself. Those things belonged to the version of me who believed she still had a place there. I found my husband's old flannel folded neatly in the corner of a drawer. It still carried the faint scent of cedar. Holding it, I thought about the life we built together, modest, simple, full of love. He always told me I had a quiet kind of strength, the kind that didn't need to shout to be heard. That night, I finally understood what he meant. When the last box was taped shut, I sat at the kitchen table one last time. The clock ticked softly. The refrigerator hummed. The same sounds that once reminded me of family now marked the rhythm of my departure. I took a scrap of paper from the counter and wrote a single line. The cleaning is done. Just like you asked. No anger, no accusation, just truth. By the time the clock struck midnight, I was gone. The headlights of my old car cut through the quiet streets of Dayton, and for the first time in years, I wasn't driving for anyone else. The rearview mirror showed nothing but darkness, and somehow, that felt like freedom. The road stretched endlessly ahead of me, a thin ribbon of silver under the glow of the streetlights. My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel as I drove through the quiet Ohio night, the hum of the tires the only sound keeping me company. I didn't have a plan, just a packed car, a little cash, and a heart that finally refused to stay still. The air felt colder than I expected, sharp and alive. I rolled down the window for a moment, letting the wind wash over my face. It carried the scent of wet asphalt and pine, freedom in its rawest form. Beneath the fear, something else stirred, a flicker of relief. For the first time in years, no one was waiting for me to make dinner, fold laundry, or keep quiet. Around 2 a.m, I pulled into a small roadside motel, one of those with a flickering neon sign and a handful of cars in the lot. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time before stepping out. The world was still. My footsteps sounded strange on the pavement, like I was walking into a life that didn't yet recognize me. Inside the tiny room, I turned on the lamp and sank into the bed. It smelled faintly of bleach and old fabric softener. I should have felt lonely, but instead, I felt light, untethered. I slept deeper that night than I had in years. The next morning, I found a diner across the road. I sat by the window and ordered eggs, pancakes, and black coffee. It was the first breakfast I'd ever eaten alone without guilt or glances of disapproval. The waitress smiled when she refilled my cup, and that simple kindness nearly brought me to tears. As I watched the sun rise over the empty highway, I realized how long it had been since I'd done something just for myself. My whole life had been about giving, as a wife, a nurse, a mother, until I forgot how to simply be. That week, I rented a small apartment in a quiet town by the river. I found part-time work at a library, organizing books and greeting people with a smile that finally felt real. My life was smaller now, humbler, quieter, but it was mine. And somewhere between those dusty shelves and the sound of pages turning, I began to remember the woman I used to be. It was nearly a week before I heard anything. The phone in my little apartment had stayed quiet, which was exactly what I needed. Then one morning, as I was pouring coffee and listening to the radio, a neighbor from Dayton called. She said the police had been by the house, asking if anyone had seen me. Apparently, my son and daughter-in-law had reported me missing. I remember sitting down, holding the cup in both hands, watching the steam rise. Missing. The word felt strange, as if I were an object misplaced, rather than a person who had simply walked away. Later, I heard bits and pieces. Megan had called every friend, every church member, even some of the old co-workers from the hospital where I used to work. David had taken time off from his job. He'd been driving around, checking bus stations, hotels, calling hospitals. Ethan, my sweet grandson, had asked where Grandma went, and for the first time, they didn't have an answer. They started leaving messages, dozens of them. My phone, the one I'd bought just for emergencies, blinked with voicemails. Their voices were cracked, desperate. They said words I hadn't heard in years. Love. Sorry. Please. I listened once, then deleted them. Not out of cruelty, but because I finally understood I didn't need to hear those words to forgive them. While they were pacing through worry, I was hanging new curtains in my apartment, pale yellow ones that made the room glow in the morning light. I folded fresh sheets, still warm from the dryer, and watched the sunrise spill across the walls. There was peace in that quiet, the kind that comes when you no longer chase the things that once broke you. I felt compassion for them. Yes, they were learning a lesson I'd lived for years, that love cannot be taken for granted, and silence sometimes speaks louder than apology. But as I sat there, the light growing stronger with each minute, I knew I couldn't go back. Some absences aren't meant to be filled. They're meant to be understood. When they finally found me, it was a Sunday afternoon. I was sitting by the window, tending to a little potted fern I'd bought at the farmer's market. I remember hearing a knock, soft, hesitant, and when I opened the door, there they were, my son, my daughter-in-law, and my grandson. Their faces looked older somehow, lined with worry and guilt. David stepped forward first, eyes red, voice trembling. Megan hovered just behind him, holding Ethan close. There were tears, apologies, and words I had waited years to hear. They said they missed me, that the house wasn't the same, that they just wanted me home. For a moment, I believed them. My heart, that foolish, forgiving part, wanted to believe this was love rediscovered, not guilt disguised as it. They came inside, looked around my small apartment with polite smiles. Megan commented on how cozy it was. David kept saying how they could help me pack if I was ready. His words tumbled over each other, rushed, desperate, as if he was afraid I might change my mind. Between his reassurances, I caught small things he didn't mean to reveal: how the bills had piled up, how it's been hard without you there to help. That was when the warmth began to fade. I realized their panic had less to do with me and more to do with what I had provided. The meals, the care, the quiet service that had kept their world steady. Ethan ran into my arms, and I held him, breathing in the smell of his hair. That part was real. The love of a child untouched by pride or need. But even as I smiled and nodded through their promises, a calm truth settled over me. They missed the comfort I gave them, not the person I was. When they left that day, I hugged them tightly at the door. I told them I was happy they came. I meant it. I was happy to see them safe, to know they cared in their own imperfect way. But as their car disappeared down the road, I felt no pull to follow. Some reunions are meant for closure, not return. It arrived in a thin, white envelope, the kind that looks harmless, a bank logo in the corner. My name printed neatly in blue ink. I almost tossed it aside with the grocery flyers, but something made me open it. Inside was a statement about a property loan, one tied to my old house. The house my husband and I built with our own hands. The house I thought was long paid off and secure. At first, I assumed it was a mistake, a clerical error. But as I flipped through the pages, my breath caught. My name appeared again and again. Signatures I didn't remember signing. Authorizations that bore my handwriting, but not my memory. A line of numbers I didn't understand told the rest of the story. My savings were gone. The house had been mortgaged months before I left. And the person who held power of attorney on every document was my son. I sat there at the kitchen table, the papers spread before me like a confession written in ink. The clock ticked. Outside, the sun slipped behind the clouds, dimming the small apartment. I couldn't cry at first. I just stared at the papers until the words blurred. When the tears did come, they were quiet, the kind that leave no sound, only salt on your lips. It wasn't the money that broke me. It was the realization that even after everything, the meals, the years, the forgiveness, I was still just something to be used. My son hadn't seen me as a mother. He'd seen me as an account to draw from, a signature to borrow. I found an old photo in my drawer later that evening. My husband standing in front of that same house, hammer in hand, smiling like the world was new. I traced the edge of his face and whispered a promise to him in my heart. I won't let this pain define me. The next morning, I called the bank. I told them I would not pursue charges, that I would not fight to reclaim what was already lost. Some debts aren't worth collecting. As I hung up, a calm settled in. Justice, I realized, isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about peace, about choosing to live free of the people who taught you how to disappear. It's been almost a year since that envelope arrived, since everything I thought I knew about family unraveled. The seasons have turned twice, and with each sunrise, the sharpness of it all has softened into something quieter. My days now begin simply, a pot of coffee, the sound of birds outside my small kitchen window, a walk to the park where I sometimes sit and watch the world move on without hurry. I've learned to enjoy the stillness. My life no longer revolves around waiting for someone to need me. I cook for one, read more than I used to, and I've started keeping a small garden on the balcony. There's something healing about watching life grow again from something so small. A tomato vine curling upward, a flower opening at dawn. It reminds me that I, too, have begun again. I hear about my family sometimes through others. My son has been struggling. The house was eventually taken by the bank, and the financial strain has weighed on his marriage. They reached out a few times, mostly through short messages. I've replied kindly, but with distance. I don't wish them harm. I just wish them peace. The kind I had to find the hard way. Forgiveness. I've learned, doesn't mean welcoming back what broke you. It means setting down the burden of anger and choosing not to carry it any further. I forgave my son, not for his sake, but for mine, because I no longer want to live defined by pain or by what was taken from me. Some evenings, I think of my husband. I imagine him sitting beside me as I tend to my little garden, his hand warm over mine. I think he'd be proud, not because I endured, but because I finally remembered how to live. There's peace now in my small world. I laugh with neighbors. I sleep through the night, and sometimes I even catch myself smiling for no reason at all. That, I think, is what freedom feels like. Quiet, steady, and real. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, or forgotten by the people you love, I want you to know it's never too late to see yourself again, to start again, to live again. Tell me, have you ever had to walk away from something that was breaking you, just to remember who you are? I read every story you share, and maybe, like me, you'll find that peace isn't found by being seen, it's found by finally seeing yourself. Time has a way of softening even the deepest wounds. These days, When I wake up and light fills the small kitchen, I no longer feel that ache of being unseen. I pour my coffee, tend to my plants, and breathe in the quiet, not as loneliness, but as peace. The silence that once felt heavy now feels like a friend, one that reminds me how far I've come. Looking back, I realize that love doesn't always protect you, and family doesn't always see you for who you are. But peace begins the moment you decide your worth isn't something that needs to be earned. I used to think my value came from what I gave, the meals, the care, the constant yes. Now I know it comes from simply being, from the gentle truth that I am enough, even when no one else says it. There's a kind of freedom in aging that no one tells you about. When you've lost enough, you start to see what truly matters. The small things, a clean table, a morning walk, the first bloom in spring, become proof that life still wants to meet you halfway. And in those moments, I find myself smiling, grateful that I chose to keep living instead of merely existing. Sometimes I think about that woman I used to be, the one who stood in the kitchen, holding her phone, heartbreaking over a message. I wish I could tell her she'd make it here, that the pain would one day become light. If you're listening to this, maybe you need to hear it too. You are not invisible. You never were. The moment you choose to see yourself, really see yourself, is the moment the world begins to change.